Ty, what says America more? Smell of the grill, the sound of fireworks, Chevrolet, or maybe the Cubs beating the brakes off those goddamn dirty birds? That and more coming up on the Setup Man podcast right now. Oh, what a week. Thank you for joining us here on the Setup Man podcast. I am your host, Alex Brault, along with my guy, Ty, riding a shotgun with me today. We got a show for you. It has been a busy week. So, what are we going to talk about today? Obviously, we're going to talk Cubs Cardinals and all of the, what's the word I'm looking for? The results, everything, the fallout. That's what I was looking for. The fallout with that series. Then we're going to talk about Jameson Taillon and that injury. And oh boy, it's been the season from hell in terms of pitching injuries for the Cubs. Then we're going to talk a little trade deadline. What chips are you willing to cash in for that star pitcher or star bat? And then we'll top this show off with a little Cubs Twins preview. But first, before we get into all of that, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell so anytime us, Kyle, or anyone on the Setup Man Network posts something of value or any piece of content, you will be the first to know. Audio only, you're missing out. That's okay. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and also help us out with a 5-star review. Speaking of 5 stars, a 5-star weekend to cap off an amazing homestand by your Chicago Cubs. A 5-1 homestand, including a series win against the St. Louis Cardinals. They now have a 4-game lead in the division over the Milwaukee Brewers, and they have the best run differential in the entire sport. And, I mean, we got to bring in the choir. I have lots and lots of stat of the days. It's been, since I was off on Thursday. Choir! Stat of the day! Per Jesse Rogers, Seiya Suzuki is the 4th Cubs player with 50 extra base hits before the All-Star break, joining Javi Baez in 2018, MVP season. Derek Lee in 2005, outside of Albert Pujols, probably should have been an MVP season. And Sammy Sosa in 2001. I miswrote that on the outline. But that is some damn good company. We'll get to that in a second. Stat of the day number 2. Stat of the day. Yeah, we did it twice. Per Chris Kamka on X, Saturday was the first time that earned runs were allowed on Drew Pomerantz's watch in the major leagues in 1,439 days. That's a lot of days. Multiple years.
That's a lot of days.
That is a lot of days. Drew Pomerantz finally gave up an earned run on Saturday with his start. He didn't give him up, but he left guys on, and then Chris Flexen gave up a base hit to score a couple for St. Louis. But I want to start here. I put this out on X. I got a little engagement, but no one really seemed to take issue with it. Ty, I want to ask you something. If Pete Crow Armstrong didn't exist, or he's a Met, or whatever, should Seiya Suzuki be in the MVP conversation? I'm throwing it out there because this guy has been unreal. Yes, he still has that bat through. Like, oh my gosh, what was he looking at? But outside, PCA has just been a revelation. Fan favorite, just a rocket ship across the sky. Kyle Tucker, we know what he is. But Seiya Suzuki, man, not listed an All-Star, which was just a travesty in its own right. But Seiya Suzuki, in my opinion, is putting up MVP numbers, and Ty, he should be in the MVP conversation, in my opinion. What say you?
I think where I disagree is the fact that he is a DH. I know he's logged quite a few innings, not quite a few innings, at least a number of innings in the outfield. And you make, I mean, the valid points is that he leads the MLB in RBIs. I get that. If PCA doesn't exist, I could see it. It's just hard. It's just really hard because it just seems right now like Seiya is having a stellar season. But if PCA doesn't exist, does Seiya have that great of a year? I mean, there's all these different factors. I don't know, man. That's tough.
Let's put it this way. Black and white. PCA is a Met or not in the picture at all. He's playing football instead or whatever. Otani's still there, right? So that's an issue. I mean, you got other guys that have had great seasons. I'm just asking, should he get MVP votes this season? Because you're right, he doesn't typically DH. All-star ballot, he was in at DH. But Council's been rotating the outfielders a lot more, and he's been a lot more solid in the outfield this year than I thought was possible. I thought his ceiling for defense was just not very high. He's been pretty good this season. So all of that into effect, should he at least get MVP votes? Let's put it that way.
I think he should at least get a vote. But again, it's just hard for me. The rebuttal to that is that Otani, of course, is a DH as well. But the Seiya thing is so fascinating to me based on the fact of, the OPS isn't higher than Schwarber's. Some numbers aren't even higher than Schwarber's, right? So does Schwarber get, MVP votes? So it's tough. I'm going to say he gets at least one if PCA is a soccer player over in France.
Oh, when you're having a day and along comes Debbie Downer.
Shut up. The amount of effort I just prepped into this show and you dropped that question onto me. What do you expect from me, my friend?
I put it out in the ether, and I was curious your opinion because let's face it, Seiya has been unbelievable. I mean, this Cubs team's been unbelievable. So let's start.
Well, he's also, the fact is that Seiya really has obviously had a stellar season. We all expected this out of him at some point. And I want to give credit to Sam Olber with this take because he was really the only one that was mentioning this for quite some time, which was Seiya wasn't a guy that could lead a team, but he could be a guy if he had somebody in front of him. And the guy who's in front of him is K Tuck, and that's King Tuck. And holy smokes, did he have a day today? So again, this was bound to happen, but they had to get a superstar for them to be able to see, this success. And it's exciting to see, but I know we got a lot more to talk about than Mr. Seiya Suzuki, but what a year he's had. And again, that bomb he hit tonight, he's just on fire, man. It's awesome.
It really has been fun to watch. Okay, so let's get into some of the nitty gritty stuff after I just threw the Seiya question at you. So on the homestand, they went 5-1. But the only loss was against a left-handed pitcher. And we've all, at this point, are sick and tired of talking about the Cubs' struggles against left-handed pitching. But they did put up a decent fight against Liberatore. So I guess my question to you, Ty, is is the worry lessening a little bit? Or you still have a decent level of concern against left-handed pitching?
What I felt like what it felt like for me during that game is that they were putting up great at bats. I will say that Liberatore was not necessarily good on his side of things as well. So that was probably the only part that I'm still a little discouraged about is that he didn't have his best stuff and we only still put up, I believe, wasn't it like 3 on him, which 2 earned runs. So didn't even have his best stuff. At one point when he was at around 80 pitches, he was 50-50 split on balls and strikes. And we still were not able to get anything across. And of course, the shortstop was up at one point in a key, situation and didn't come through. So at this point, I need to see something happen. And that probably we will not be able to see that until the Yankee series if they throw Fried or Rodon, which those aren't 2 fun arms to be able to face during this time either, right? So it just ends on a crappy stretch there with the scheduling. But I got to see a little bit more. It just felt like they were working to death. It felt like they were putting up good at bats. Like I said, Liberatore didn't have his best stuff, but I'm gonna need to see a lot more from them moving forward.
Yeah, you mentioned they were grinding at bats. They had opportunities, and you know what's funny is ESPN also noted tonight Dansby Swanson struggles with runners in scoring position. Outside of his struggles there, he's hitting like 289. Like all of his other numbers are really, really good. So it's just like, and then they move him down in the order tonight and put Michael Busch in the 5 spot. They walk Busch, and it still gets to Swanson. I
Yeah.
just, I roll my eyes like, oh God.
I think teams do
What?
some research. I'd say the Cardinals probably do a little bit of research on the Cubs hitters. Yeah.
Probably, I would think. But then even like during the series, if no one was on base, I'm like, oh, he's getting a hit here. So I don't. You could tell he's pressing a little bit. Even tonight, he kind of swung out of his shoes at one that was like 6 inches outside. It's like, come on, man. We all know you're better than that. I think that's the struggle there. But they are tinkering with the lineup a little bit. Even Michael Busch got to face Liberatore on yesterday, which I thought was encouraging. That they're
And did
trying.
what? And did what?
Michael Busch, man, I didn't have him on the outline. Let's just take 30 seconds. He was unreal. He took Liberatore deep. He took anybody deep. He didn't care. He was so hot. And normally his numbers are better on the road away from Wrigley. He was unbelievable this weekend.
When he
Actually,
gets dialed in, that's the player that the Dodgers thought that they had there for a long time. That also goes kind of leans into our conversation later that I'll just kind of, sort of, peek the blindfolds up a little bit and look into to this is that prospects who are blocked. And unfortunately for Michael Busch, there's a guy by the name of Freddie Freeman who's at playing first base for the Dodgers right now. He's had a pretty good career, 2-time World Series winner. So
very good.
these guys are, for a guy like Bush and a lot of these top prospects, it's a lot of the times it's based on opportunity. And of course, do they, mended well with the organization. And for the entire season, he's been put in positions to only hit against righties and against lefties. It's got to be a little frustrating for him. And you saw in his post-game interview that he said, I've always hit lefties well. So there, you could tell that there was a little animosity there of like, hey, like I deserve this opportunity a hell of a lot, long ago than finally getting it now. And I think the Cubs are saying, well, Justin Turner really hasn't proved anything really at all this year. And so I know that was more than 30 seconds, but I felt like he deserved more than 30 seconds based on what he's done. But that lefty on lefty bomb was just hysterical. That's called feel, folks. I tweeted about it. That's called feel. Hey, when your best hitter is doing extremely well, not best hitter, but when your hitter at the time is having the hottest stretch, you let the guy play until until baseball turns into baseball and, he's, having an 0 for 15 stretch. Like you just ride the wave with that. And thankfully Counts did that. So shout out to Counsell for trusting in his guys because God, that was nice to see.
Absolutely. And just some quick math on the weekend. These are video game numbers. These are actually probably better than video game numbers. Michael Busch, 9 for 12, 4 homers, 6 RBIs, 2 doubles, and not including today, he had 20 total bases, and I believe he had 3 more today, a base hit and a double, so 3. So he had 23 total bases on the series. That's insane, man.
Insane, bro.
He was so good. And
Yeah.
I know he didn't make the All-Star game, and right or wrong, I'm not as upset about that one as I am Seiya, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But man, oh man, he was so good this week. And when Busch gets hot, it's in bunches. So we're going to have a 2-week stretch here, it feels like, where Michael Busch is going to be locked in. Even Mason Wynn on the ESPN broadcast today, when they were trying to talk to him, was like, God, can we get this guy out one time? Which was just incredible content. But yeah,
my favorite in-game interview of the year.
Well, and we put up
Cardinals Cubs scored like 6.
Yeah. And to tell you the truth, I actually felt bad for him because I think they were trying to talk to him and he just stopped talking. He was talking to his other infielders like, hey, I got there if you go there. He was like, which was really interesting to watch in real time, but they just stopped talking to him. I'm like, can you get him off the little screen and leave him alone? He's trying to work.
Well, I think what they should do is honestly for those in-game interviews, just do them when the guy either gets out or he, comes off, or sorry, he had batted the previous inning. And then the following inning, that's when you interview him. There must be some rules that don't allow that. But on the field stuff, I mean, the poor guy was sprinting around. No, I don't say poor guy. Why should I say that about him? But the guy was running around for hell like 4 or 5 plays in a row, it felt like. So, yeah. I would like to give a few more shout outs here in the series, unless you had anything else that you wanted to touch on.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Have at it.
One guy that I really want to give a shout out to is Colin Ray. I tweeted this on after the Tyone injury. I know we'll discuss that here in a little bit. But I felt like at this time that Imanaga was the guy that we can trust and be good to go for the rest of the year. All the other arms are a little bit suspect. Even Matthew Boyd, because of the innings, that he hasn't thrown since 2019. Who knows what's going to happen with Cade? Colin Ray can't be trusted. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, dominant. I mean, that was the start that he had against like the Dodgers. I mean, that was Colin Ray, the beginning of the season where you're like, did we just sign this guy for $5 million and he might be a number 3?
Yeah.
So 5 2/3, 1 hit, 1 earned, 2 walks, 4 Ks, and the only hit was a home run. I mean, just outstanding stuff. And look, we're going to talk. I'm going to break down for you folks on just how the rest of the year looks like right now for the Cubs with this. But if we get a few more starts of those, we don't need them every single time, but if we can get just a few of those, wow, will that be helpful for the Cubs for the rest of the season?
Well, I think, you know what? Unless you have anything else you want to mention about this series, I think we just get to it.
Lastly, I'll just say 8
Yeah.
home runs on game 1, franchise record on Friday, which was talk about a 4th of July, man. Jeff's kiss. That was awesome. Hey, your Cubbies just won a damn series against the Cardinals, and I couldn't be happier. Let's move on, brother. Let's move on.
Okay. Absolutely. So, some not so good news. Jameson Tyone is out at least a month with the calf strain. It was announced by the club earlier this week. So, he's been placed on the IL. Jordan Wicks actually pitched tonight for the first time back in the big leagues, but he's been recalled from AAA Iowa. Jordan Wicks, his last 3 games, and which was the last month, 1-1 with a 1.64 ERA, only 11 innings pitched, 16 Ks to 2 walks. So, how do the Cubs navigate? Because as I said earlier in the show, it's been a season from hell for pitching health for this Cubs team, and yet they still are crushing it. We mentioned Colin Ray. Cade Horton looked awesome in his last start against Cleveland. That was Thursday night. I mean, they're getting contributions, but how long is this a house of cards situation? How long is this going to last? And I know, Ty, you had a bunch of information on the Tyone injury, so I'm going to clear out. The floor is yours.
Well, I'm going to try to break this down as not go too much into detail here, folks. So please bear with me if I go long-winded. I apologize. But this is how the situation is for the rest of the year. So the Cubs have 72 games remaining, right? So we technically have 72 starts that we have to fill out, right? So over the course of the season thus far, the Cubs have mainly stayed with a 5-man rotation, okay? That means if you stick with a 5-man rotation, whether you're interchanging guys or bringing guys in, you need 14 to 15 starts per guy. Okay. So right now, if you're looking at the 4 names that we know for sure that we're going to have here, unless there's trades that happen, and then the by committee is like what I like to call it as well. So right now, we need 14 or 15 starts from Imanaga and Colin Ray, which based on their innings and based on their history, it should be fine barring any, unforeseen injuries, right? So we know we're good there. Where now it gets into question, and this is something that I'm just really interested to watch here for the rest of the year, is Matthew Boyd. Because after tonight's game, he'll be at, I believe it's 103 or 104 innings. Call it that, okay? So with the amount of starts that he's needed for the rest of the year, based on we're hopeful that he can go, I averaged it out to about 6 innings per start. 5 to 6 if you want to be a little bit more cautious. You need 84 more innings from him, okay, if we're going off the 6 innings. So call it between that 70 to 80 mark. That puts it at around that 170, 180, 190. He hasn't thrown north of 100 innings since 2019, so that's going to be something to watch. Cade Horton, he's at 82 right now this year between MLB and AAA, okay? So the approximate workload needed is right around 70 innings per start, just because I put him down to about 5 innings we're going to need from him because he's not necessarily Matthew Boyd's level. So that puts him to about 152 innings. So now those are the 2 guys right now that you go, are we going to be able to have them for the rest of the year? I would say Boyd at this point is pretty much unless we don't know something there. I would think they're just going to let him go as long as they can. Just because 34, it's you can't really do much at the end of the day. Maybe they stretch out a couple start days here and there.
Well, they don't
When
have
they
a
get,
choice.
well, they don't, and then that gets interesting with the 5th spot, right? So we got Imanaga, Colin Ray, Matthew Boyd, and Cade Horton, right? So we have 2 that are for sure. One that's a little bit like, yeah, he's probably good, and then Cade Horton, which we probably will see in innings limit. Number 5, though, is when we go by committee, because Tyone is probably, my guess, this is totally a guess, folks, end of August, early September.
Oof.
So
Yeah, I suppose.
based on more than a month, right? You got to think about he's got to go to AAA still. He's got to do a couple rehab starts. So you got Flexen, you got Jordan Wicks, you got any other AAA arms that you could find, and then lastly, trade pieces. So are those 2 trade pieces? Hopefully, it's 2. Are going to be able to cover that part of the season where Tyone is out. So then when Tyone comes back, then that guy would replace Cade Horton. And then your other one would be a stud that you could put at the top of the rotation that can start a wild card game. So that's where we're at right now, folks. We have to find these other starts that we could lose from a guy like Cade Horton. And also, too, now we got to figure out what in the world they're going to do for those starts by basically, like I said, committee. So right now, that's sort of how it looks in my eyes, Alex, is that 72 starts left, 14 to 15 starts per guy. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Cubs manage this for the rest of the season.
Now, I had this on first of all, wonderful job breaking that down. I thought that was really good stuff. The Jordan Wicks question to me becomes more interesting, and even the Ben Brown question becomes more interesting, especially with Tyone. I wasn't really hit. Ben Brown wasn't on my radar tonight. He pitched tonight for the first time in Iowa, seemed to be rolling, and then fell into some trouble, gave up a home run, which obviously you don't like to see, but he retired the first 10 he saw. I don't think we've heard the last of Ben Brown. It's probably just going to be due to injuries. I mean, it's just been nuts. But I guess the question is, and I was thinking this yesterday too, and I actually was talking to Kyle about this. Why didn't they just start Wicks yesterday? He had been pitching well in AAA. I know he hasn't been super impressive up here today. He pitched in garbage time. But at some point, you kind of need an answer as to what he is. So is Jordan Wicks the answer for, let's call it, a month until they make some moves? Because truthfully, between you and me, the bullpen games, that's not sustainable, especially when they're so cautious with how they use the pen already. That's why I was surprised you and I watched the end of the game together. We were surprised Palencia pitched tonight. He didn't throw very much, but they're so cautious and so mindful of how they use their bullpen. I don't think bullpen games are sustainable. So what do? Is it Chris Flexen? Is it Jordan Wicks? Is it someone else we're not thinking of?
That is a very, very good question. And the thing I think about is that I would rather go Wicks because I want to save Pomeranz for lefty on lefty matchups.
Yeah.
Because right now, Thielbar technically is your only lefty in the pen because Pomeranz, as of late, has been an opener.
Yeah.
So I would like to see Wicks get a start or two because right now it looks like what it seems like to me is Pomeranz goes opener and then Flexen comes in. So they're going that lefty righty. And then Wicks will come in as sort of a bulk guy. I don't think that'll be the case moving forward. So then do you go an opener like I don't know, you want to call it maybe Ryan Brazier to Jordan Wicks? Jordan Wicks was 96 tonight. That was pretty sick to see.
I saw that. Yeah.
He was, you could tell he had he wanted to pitch. So yeah, that's where but that begs the question of like, do you trust Wicks to give you then those 5 innings after Brazier comes in? Because then you're just going to end up using more bullpen. And then Pomeranz on the other side, he struggled mightily. Flexen had to come in early. He did a great job. So again, it's just, I always say this, but this season is so damn fascinating, man, because you're like, wait a minute, this team is that good offensively, yet they have all these injuries, but then they still somehow stay in games. And you're just like, wait a minute, Colin Ray somehow threw 5 2/3 on Friday after we basically said that he should be DFA'd or sent down to AAA or basically sent off to retirement. I don't know what that looks like at this point, But I would be a little pissed off if they did just do the opener route with Pomeranz, just because I do like the fact of having two lefties in the pen.
Yeah, and Thielbar's been outstanding. I don't want to take
Outstanding.
anything away from him, but also having a weapon like Pomerantz, and granted, his last couple outings, he's been getting hit a little bit more. People are starting to watch the film, figure him out a little bit, so that worries me a little bit. But as far as the Flex and Wicks thing, I'm right there with you. I would rather see Wicks, see what your young guys has, even if it is just for the next, let's say, 3 weeks until you make a trade. Let's just see what that looks like. Flexen, we kind of know what he is. And also, fun fact, he's been an awesome weapon to have in extra innings. I know you don't really classify a pitcher or a reliever as like an extra innings guy, but he is not giving up. He's not giving up a run in extra innings this year, which has led the Cubs to have crazy games like Thursday. Manfred man on second, no problem, no worries. Bottom of the 10th, Matt Shaw, let's go home. He's been really good in a lot of different situations. So to lose a sentence I did not think I would say in the year of our Lord 2025, to have Flexen be a versatile option and almost a shutdown option is really valuable. To burn him in the beginning of the game, I'm not a giant fan of that. And I just want to see the kid pitch. Did he figure stuff out in Iowa? Let's figure out what he is. Because maybe if he's figured something out, if you're like, well, we have Brown we like more, we have this guy we like more, maybe you can use him as a chip in 3 weeks. And other teams will get to see that at the big league level.
Again, I think this could all change tomorrow, folks.
Oh, yeah.
This could all change tomorrow, the next day, or the day after that. July 31st, I believe by 8 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. I think it's 6 p.m. Eastern is the trade deadline.
I believe you're right, yes.
We are just a couple weeks away, folks, and I promise you this. We're not the only team that's going to want to go after some of these names. We'll talk about some guys that we may be sending off here in a little bit that we will, send our letters of recognition to them. But we talk about all of this, right? I have different colored font on my notes right now, folks. I was dialed in while my wife was watching her soap opera shows. I was dialed in on all these stats. Everything could change in the next minute to 5:59 p.m. Eastern time. Buckle up.
Oh, it's already starting. Because guess who? Everyone was like, oh, Eugenio Suarez. Well, he made the All-Star team. Guess who just got more expensive? And also, guess who's sniffing around? The New York Yankees. And if the Yankees want a guy, they typically get that guy. It's already starting. So that's actually a good transition. So with some of the prices going up, with some teams dropping out, maybe some places and people that we didn't expect to be available are now might be available. So there have been a ton. Excuse me, Jesus.
I know, I get emotional too, dude.
Oh, it's crazy. It's trade deadline time. There have been multiple reports saying the Cubs are going to be ultra aggressive. And our main story tonight is, what does that look like? What does it mean to be quote unquote all in? Well, the Cubs have if they're at a poker table, they got a lot of chips. But how far this is our question of the day also for you, the fans at home. So comment below and let us know. How far are you willing to go all in? What does that mean to you? What does that look like? Who are you willing to give up? Who do you want to keep? And we have 4 candidates here, and we'll talk about some throw-ins and honorable mentions at the end of this. But the 4 main names we've heard in terms of they might be willing to move that guy. Maybe it's going to hurt a little more to get in Edward Cabrera or a Sandy Alcantara or a whoever. Maybe you have to throw in this guy. So let's start with our first name that probably is on the trade block in the next couple weeks. That would be outfielder. Let's try this again. Outfielding prospect Owen Casey. On the season, he's batting .273 with a .382 on-base percentage, 16 homers, 39 RBIs. Now, while he is still striking out quite a bit, in his last 7 games, he's hitting .438, an on-base percentage of .526. For those that don't know, on-base percentage, he's getting on base more than half the time, which is insane. And he's also got 4 homers this week. Why would you trade him? Well, he's blocked currently. If you believe that Kyle Tucker is your right fielder for the next decade, where's he going to go? Especially now. He seems to be figuring out AAA outside of the strikeout stuff. So your outfield, center field, locked down until the end of the decade. You don't have to worry about that. That's done. Right field, maybe, but you're hoping to sign that guy to, let's say, a 10-year deal. And Ian Happ's not going anywhere. So he's kind of blocked at the moment. And Ty, the question I have for you is, if you end up trading him, does that signal anything in Kyle Tucker's direction, or is it just like, hey, we got to do this because we got to win now? Because he might not be here. Or maybe it's like, okay, we're okay giving up this guy because we kind of know in the back of our minds, like, we're going to be really aggressive to get 30 in a Cubs uniform for the next decade.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's why either one of them get traded, whether that's Casey or we'll talk about Alcantara here in a little bit. And my reasoning behind that is that either way, you're going to have to pick one of them to stay on this roster, because you're going to use one of them as either a backup outfielder or your starting right fielder, right? And this also begs the question is that are you comfortable enough putting Seiya Suzuki back out in right field? Because that, we'll talk about another prospect here in a little bit that could also be in the cards for a trade, but also could be in position to be on the team based on what happens with Kyle Tucker. I'll talk about that in here in a little bit. Look, where I'm at with Casey is that the strikeout totals are a little too significant for me. Now, based on your lineup, though, can you construct it to where he's kind of got a situation like a Seiya, where it's like, or a PCA, where it's like, we got some dudes in the lineup. You don't need to necessarily worry about the fact that, to hit, 275, 280. We just need you to go out there and hit bombs. You know what I mean? So again, there's some decisions to come on these players. But again, you make the great point here. It all comes down to Tucker. And I think that if they get rid of both of them, I mean, I'm going to read into that like Tucker's, they know for sure that they're bringing Tucker back.
Or at least we'll have a competitive offer.
A very competitive offer.
Yeah.
I mean, you can still find somebody in free agency. It's not like it's the end of
Sure.
the world, but it's no one's going to be a Kyle Tucker in free agency, or Casey Alcantara will be that level as well, obviously. So that bolds the question. But I'm actually intrigued by how Seiya has looked this year thus far out in the outfield. Not saying that's in the cards. He might just be a DH moving forward and just be a backup outfielder, but also something to consider.
Yeah, and I think they trade one of them regardless because they're going to have to. And actually, let's talk about Kevin Alcantara. So Kevin Alcantara, the other top outfield prospect that they have, kind of the same story. He's hitting 268. He's heating up at the moment, though. His on base for the season is 347, 11 homers, 45 RBIs. In the last month, he's hitting 352 with a 403 on base percentage and slugging 63.4. Reason to keep? Again, same reason that you would keep Kevin Alcantara. And between you and I,
Keepo
Ty,
and Casey mean. Keepo and Casey mean.
yes.
You said keep it. Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah. The reason you keep, well, I mean, either of these guys, kind of the same reasons. But for Alcantara, Ty, I believe that Alcantara's got a higher ceiling, but the basement is a heck of a lot lower because his cold streaks are mighty cold, like Antarctica cold. So if you believe that this guy has the higher ceiling, he might be more of a lottery ticket, but maybe you hang on to him and you're more willing to let go of Casey, or vice versa. Maybe you think Casey's ceiling is a little higher. I personally don't, but I do think his floor is higher, which now we're talking about stocks basically. Like, oh, do you buy high on this guy? Do you sell low? It just gets really confusing, but his reasons to keep and trade are basically the same as Casey because, again, what if his future isn't in the Cubs outfield? Where is his future in the Cubs organization? Either of these guys.
Agreed. And they're both 23, right? They're both about, or they're just about to turn 23 here in the next couple of days, the both of them. Look, both guys I would be okay with keeping. I'm not here to say that I prefer Alcantara over Casey. I think Alcantara, as you mentioned, has the higher ceiling just based on, he's a freak. He really is. The way his swing, he's a tall, lengthy kid. Like there is so much pop in that bat, but when you're that big, it's hard to keep everything in sync all the time, right? Versus a guy like Casey is a little bit shorter, a little bit stockier, can at least keep the ball, keep things a little bit more, I don't know, compact, if you want to call it. So preferably would rather keep a guy like an Alcantara just because the ceiling is so high. But again, this goes back to the conversation, right? Can you look at either of these guys to man right field next year on a team that will have, again, high expectations to do well, even if Kyle Tucker walks? That begs the question. What does the Cubs organization think of those things, and what do they think of both players? I don't know that answer, but you make a very good point there of like, there has to be this ability of like, okay, so if you're going to go after, so let's paint the picture like this, right? A guy with a higher ceiling, okay, going to a team like the Marlins is probably going to be more preferred than a guy like Owen Casey.
Yeah.
Versus a guy like Casey going to a team that, maybe has their outfield pretty locked up and probably just needs like a good power bat off the bench, or maybe a guy that they think, can, man right field right away and give him a decent season. Maybe you go the Owen Casey route. That's why I think Alcantara will get traded for that bigger name, just because I think that people are looking at him going, well, we can get a heck of a lot more from this guy probably than we can from Owen Casey. Again, I want to also make a point here too, folks. We all thought Matt Shaw was going to come up this year and be a stud third baseman from the offensive standpoint, and he has struggled mightily, okay? Yep. Thank God for his defense over at third, even getting sent down. So, again, there's a lot of prospect huggers out there, and I totally see the point of doing that, right? We're now seeing that a little bit with Cam Smith. But look, these guys have been in the organization for a long time. Wherever they go, they're probably going to do okay, and we need to accept that. But we also have to look at these things and say, look, what is the highest ceiling? What can get us the best pitcher right now to win? As a Cub fan, do you want to win now? Or do you want to wait for Kevin Alcantara or Owen Casey to be this top-of-the-line player in 4 to 5 years?
And they might not even make it.
Bingo.
And to do my best Stephen A. Smith impersonation, let me make one thing very, very clear. This season has catapulted us. The window is open. We are now in the contender tier, right? We're here. If you let Kyle Tucker walk and you empty the treasure chest and you have nothing to backfill, I'm telling you right now, on this very show, across the land, I'm not going back. This is the second rebuild we've had in the last however many years, 15 years. Ty's hiding from me. We are at a point now where, as Cub fans, we are pretty much demanding, hey, you have a superstar in right field. Sign him. We're not going back. We're here. Ty, it's okay. I'm not yelling at you. I'm yelling just in general.
Okay. Sorry. I thought you were.
No, but you would agree, right? We're not going back. We're here. The window's open. So, sure, go get Edward Cabrera. Go get, Joe Ryan and Johan Duran from the Twins. Whatever you got to do, that's fine. But as a fan, there's no shot in hell I want to go backwards next season. Now being at this mountaintop, best run differential, we just rattled off a bunch of stats on how great this team is, all these good problems that they have. I'm not going backwards. So, Kevin Alcantara, yes, you may have a very high ceiling. You might turn out to be the next Javi Baez. But you'd also look really good in Marlins blue. Owen Casey, sure, you have some problems at the plate, but you also can slug. But guess what? If we're contending, I don't want to deal with your struggles at the plate. We're doing that with Shaw right now, and that's fine. It's one guy. If you have 2, 3 of those guys, now where are you? Mm-hmm. It's just, that's why we're having this conversation. And let's move on to somebody else before I blow a gasket.
Win a World Series and make a heck of a lot more money to pay Kyle Tucker. So just wanted to bring that up. But go ahead.
There's also that. All right, so let's talk about another guy who we've kind of hinted at earlier. Moises Ballesteros, top catching prospect, arguably their top hitting prospect. On the season, he's hitting in AAA. This is 322 with a 382 on base, 8 homers, 51 RBIs. That's a whole lot of RBIs. Reason to trade? Well, kind of some positional question marks. Can he stick at catcher? Is he only a DH? He's not really big enough or agile enough to play first base. You don't really want to do the Schwarber thing and put him in left field. So there's positional questions there. But the reason to keep, if you believe his bat is as special as we have all been told through prospect, hunters, basically, like scouts, that was the word I'm looking for, through scouts and all these blog posts, if he's that special, sure, find a way to keep him, make him your DH. If you don't re-sign Tucker, okay, maybe he's your DH next season and say it goes to right. Okay, fine. I understand all of that. But Ty, again, this is another guy. What is better for his future? Would he look better in Marlin Blue? Or do you figure out a way to keep him in your organization? Because for me, if it's for Edward Cabrera or Johan Duran, I'm kind of doing that. I think I do it.
Ballesteros is the climax of this trade deadline because that'll tell you everything. First off, let's start with this year, right? According to Baseball Reference, he's given up 56 stolen bases thus far and thrown out 10. That's a 15% caught stealing rate. Okay. Now, I talked to my buddy Rich, who worked with us there for a little bit there at the beginning of the season. Shout out him because I wanted to refrain from saying this guy doesn't know how to catch or any of these things, folks. I'm not here to tell you that this guy can or can't do something. You can watch the games and make your own judgment. What I'll say is that what Rich told me was he's improving. The thing, though, is like those numbers are still concerning. The other point that I have, too, is like, okay, if you trade Casey and Alcantara and you lose Tucker out on a deal, let's say to the Yankees, and they go Juan Soto numbers, and it's just ridiculous, right, for one player. Sliding Say into right and having Ballesteros as your DH is not necessarily a bad backup plan either. He can hit at every single level, folks. Yeah. He really can. He's an unbelievable bat. Rich also told me as well that like some scouts he's talked to have said it's one of the best bats they've seen from a young hitter. The young part is also very interesting because he's 21 years old.
Yeah.
So begs the question. Again, if you trade Ballesteros, that's where I really, really, really would want them to hold on to try to get Tucker back, because then you likely, if you don't have Tucker, you have to go with the route of putting Casey or Alcantara over and right. Now you got to deal with the struggles of a hitter who strikes out a lot versus you keep Ballesteros, you trade Alcantara and Casey, or even just one of them, but most likely would trade two to get a big arm. And then you keep Ballesteros and have Say in right if Tucker walks. That's where I stand on this whole situation, Alex. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts because, again, if he's moved on early, it's going to be a really interesting storyline going into into next season.
So this is where, in a lot of these guys, this is where I land. I get this year, this team is special, right? Mm-hmm. We've seen it. There's a little magic in the air. We've talked about that on the show before. Although I do want to caution emptying out the treasure chest because I felt like they did that in 16 out of necessity. Obviously, we won, so who cares? We got a ring. Even 17, they traded Soler for Wade Davis. I mean, it worked out. Wade Davis was incredible in 2017. But then after that, I mean, Soler, he was hitting 40 home runs for Kansas City for several years and won a World Series MVP with Atlanta. There's times where that's going to happen. And if I'm keeping one of these guys between you and me, I'm keeping Ballesteros out of the. There's another name. I don't think he's going anywhere, but I do want to mention it just because I think it's an interesting thought exercise in just a second. I would keep Ballesteros because I do think the bat's going to play regardless. And you have Carson Kelly, who has become a fan favorite, and he's starting to figure it out at the plate again. Reese McGuire, like from the rafters, all of a sudden is like Mark McGuire. And then we're not even talking about Miguel Amaya, who's missed a month, and we don't even miss him because McGuire's been so good. So catching-wise, they're set for a little bit.
That's what I was going to say as well. There's no real route for him until 2027, probably going to be 2028 because there's a mutual option for Kelly in 2027, but carry on.
Well, and that's a good point to bring up because you can wait on him to develop as a catcher. That's fine. But at some point, the bat's ready. And I would imagine being in a front office, that's got to be so tempting to be like, oh, this guy could hit 300 in the big leagues tomorrow. And we even saw it. I mean, he was only up in the big leagues for a week this year. And the first couple games were a little rough, but then he started to figure it out. And you saw the at bats were getting better. He was hitting the ball harder. So out of the three guys we've mentioned already, I would hang on to Ballesteros. But if you get a crazy offer, I don't think it's off the table. I don't think he's totally untouchable. But I wouldn't be like, oh, Edward Cabrera. Okay, well, if you Ballesteros and XYZ, I wouldn't lead with him. But if that's a piece to get over the finish line on some of these, our window's now. The waiting game, I understand to a point, but I think at least defensively, you have guys that are closer to the bigs in Casey and Alcantara. He can only hit at the moment. So it's as you said, it's the question of today versus tomorrow. Every season's sacred, man. If you got a shot, it might be reckless, and this is why I'm not a GM and why my dynasty fantasy football team sucks. Because every season sacred, you want to go for it. I want to go for it this year. This team is good enough. The Dodgers have been coasting. We mentioned that a couple times on this podcast. And outside of the NL, if somehow the Cubs could get through that gauntlet in October, get to the finish line, and see Detroit or Houston, and granted, those guys are going to make moves too. But don't you just like your chances? Especially going through the NL, which is way better than the AL. Man, it's tough because I get how he could be special, but I don't want to wait for him to figure it out behind the plate. And we don't need him to figure it out behind the plate right now. Maybe his best value to us is, okay, the bat's incredible, but for us, it's more important for us right now that he goes and figures it out somewhere else because we're ready to win now. Is that the right move? I don't know, but that's why they don't pay me to make those decisions.
Let's talk about this last one because this is interesting.
It's a little bit of a wild card. So the last name I have on this list here, what would you say, Ty, if the Cubs were to trade Ben Brown to somebody that needs a pitcher or we're getting a pitcher back for? So 2025, this year Cubs only. He's not been in the minor leagues. He did pitch tonight, but I don't know what his final lines are as of recording. So with the Cubs this season, 4-6 with a 6.13 ERA and 79 and a third innings pitched. Was demoted to AAA Iowa on June 24th. Pitched tonight for the first time, as previously mentioned. The reason you keep him is because you kind of need all the pitching depth you have. We've mentioned the struggles with pitching injuries this year. You kind of just need him because even if someone goes down in the bullpen, he could slide into the bullpen and help you out there. But the reason you would potentially dangle him in a trade for, say, an Edward Cabrera or a Sandy Alcantara or a whoever would be if those pitchers are under control for several years, because then you don't have to necessarily wait for Ben Brown to figure it out. We know he can pitch at the big league level. We've seen flashes of it. But say, I'm going to use Edward Cabrera as an example because I watched him against the Brewers today and he was awesome. So let's use Cabrera as the example, right? If Miami says, okay, we want Alcantara and a young pitcher and a blah, blah, blah. Well, if it's Alcantara, Ben Brown, and Jonathan Long or someone else in the system that we haven't mentioned yet, aren't you doing that? I would do that, and I wouldn't think twice about it. And Ben Brown, I thank you. I loved watching you pitch. Thank you for your contributions, and I'm rooting for you in Miami. But again, we're in a window. It's a Cabrera, in this example, is a young pitcher under control for multiple years. Ty, wouldn't you kind of do that, or at least be tempted to do that?
I'd be very tempted to do it because if you look at the rotation next year, is Steele, Imanaga, Boyd, Tyone, and Horton, right? We're both in agreement that Horton is better than Ben Brown at this time.
Yes,
right.
Agreed.
So the question of is that do the Cubs feel like they need a fifth starter next season? If that's the case, then that fifth starter, would you rather have be Ben Brown or a big time name, right? Because now this throws in the question of if you throw a big name into this for next year, then where does Cade Horton go? So that's where it starts to get pretty interesting, folks. And that's why I think they're going to go after somebody that's probably on their last year of their deal, in my opinion. because I think that they're going to be able to, they want to be able to get something that can be used this year and then not necessarily have to rely on next year, because they got to let Horton get innings. Tyone obviously is under contract. Boyd's going to be Matthew Boyd, and then you get Steele back, and then you got Imanaga. So look, I think that's where I would be okay with them getting rid of Ben Brown, whether it is for a 1-year guy or a multi-year guy. It would sting a little bit because I think Ben Brown could ultimately be put in the bullpen and end up being a nasty, 7th, 8th inning, ninth guy, right? That's also something they could do with him next year. Don't forget about that, folks. But to answer your question, I would do it just because I think that teams are going to look at him going, man, this would be a really, really nice piece to add. I did want to mention his stat line tonight. So according to Tommy Birch on Twitter, or X, Ben Brown was through 4 innings, 2 hits, 1 run. That was 1 earned run, 1 walk, 0 Ks. Owen Casey and Ballesteros had massive nights too. But that's where I'm at, is that I think that they'll go more after the 1-year route guy. But again, if they go with a multi-year, I just look, wherever they go with is going to be an upgrade. I'm excited for it. But like you said, it's going to be this all-in factor. Like, what does all-in look like at the end of the day? So my question to you, because we're starting to get here where we need to talk about a few more things. So I have one last final question for you, Alex. Who do you think gets you the best player in return right now out of the 4 names that we mentioned?
It's probably Ballesteros, because some team can talk themselves into, like, again, we've used the Marlins as an example, so I'll keep using them. Why wouldn't the Marlins just want to bat? It's not like their lineup is the 27 Yankees. Even the Twins, like, outside of Buxton, who do the Twins have? They're like, oh my God, this guy's coming to the plate.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ballesteros would be the cherry on top of any deal, and they can sell that to their fans. Like, okay, look, the season didn't go how we planned, or our owner's cheap, but here's a 21-year-old with what could be a generational type bat. I'm not saying he's going to be Judge, but here's a kid that is almost a sure thing at the plate. Some team like the Marlins or the A's or the whoever's, they could talk themselves into that and sell that pretty easily to their fans. Even Ben Brown. I would say the 2 outfielders, Casey, I don't think a lot of people, like, I don't know that fans of the Marlins would be like, oh, we got Owen Casey, here we go. Even Alcantara, they might be like, oh, high ceiling, but kind of a lottery ticket. But Ballesteros and Ben Brown are probably my 1-2 on this list. But I do think more likely to be moved, Casey and Alcantara, I think, are more likely to be moved, with all that being said. But I do think some team can talk themselves into, well, Alcantara's got all this power, and even though he's a little streaky, we could figure it out here. I just have this gut feeling that Alcantara's going to end up in Miami. I don't know what it is. I could just picture him in the powder blue uniforms. And there's something about him. I don't know what it is, but I just see him as a Marlin.
Love it. Let's talk All-Stars. How about it?
Oh, yeah, we didn't even mention that. So it is official as of today. PCA, we already knew this, and you guys talked about it on Thursday. PCA, Kyle Tucker starting in your outfield. Awesome. Great job by Cubs Nation. Today it was announced that Matthew Boyd will also be joining them in Atlanta for the All-Star game. And I mean, again, he was incredible again tonight. Well deserved by Matthew Boyd. First time as a 34-year-old. Pretty rare, so awesome to see that. We already touched on Seiya being snubbed. Michael Busch, I didn't really have an issue with that, but he had a case to be made. Nico Horner probably had a case to be made. Ty, was there anyone that you were like, oh my God, I can't believe they didn't make it? What are they doing?
Oh, that'd be Mr. Suzuki that we talked about earlier today, who gets an MVP vote if PCA is playing cricket in a different country right now. But look, I think I didn't want to spend too much time on this because I initially wanted to spend, 20 minutes on this because it was like, wait a minute, if we're comparing Schwarber to Tatis, Seiya Suzuki to Tatis, right? Even Seiya Suzuki to a guy who didn't make it in, who should have got in over Tatis, which is Juan Soto. The way that the reserves are picked is I have it right here, is a combination of player ballots, commissioner's office, along with some fan votes as well, I believe. So it sounds like it was just something that, unfortunately, just the players picked, or the commissioners. It sounds like it was a little bit more out of the hands of the fans that we thought. And that's why I was sitting there. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, Cubs fans would have voted him in, no problem, right? But unfortunately, it was just not in the cards, and it's a shame. Maybe we'll get a replacement call this week. That would be awesome. But I thought that was important to mention because Kyle had to calm me down and say, Ty, I don't think it was everything having to do with fans. So
Yeah, and I had heard something about the players voting, and honestly, let's face it, as much as Seiya Suzuki's been awesome, he's not a household name across the land.
Yeah.
So, especially for these players, I mean, yes, they're locked in every day to what's going on, but let's be honest, it's a lot easier to vote for a name like Juan Soto or Fernando Tatis versus Seiya Suzuki, which is probably, in my opinion, probably the more correct pick. But it's easy if you're in a rush to be Acuna, Tatis, Schwarber. It's just easy to fill those names in, and no one's going to have an issue with it or call you any names for that.
Congratulations to Matthew Boyd, though. Just an outstanding year. We've talked about him a bunch on this show. Congratulations to him. It is just so incredibly well deserved. And tonight he probably could have gone. I don't know what his pitch count was through 5, but dear Lord, he could have gone 9. It was.
He was good. The only knock on him tonight was that he wasn't super efficient, which is probably why he only lasted 5 innings.
Yeah.
But we are coming up on an hour, so let's quickly get to Cubs Twins. I personally am looking forward to this. I will be at the game on Wednesday, so if you see me wandering around the concourse,
ask for his autograph.
Well, I don't know if you want my autograph, but come say hi. Anyone in Setup Nation, if you see me on Wednesday, I will be at the game. Come say hi. I'll probably be wearing my Setup Man gear. But anyway, game 1, Tuesday. They are off tomorrow. They got the Twins 5-5 in their last 10 and a -18 run differential. They are 8 games under 500. So it's been a bit of a struggle since their early success in April. Game 1, we'll see Shota Imanaga going up against Simeon Woods
Richardson. Yep.
That is a mouthful, and that's not easy like Karl Anthony Towns or Pete Crow Armstrong. Simeon Woods Richardson, a right-handed pitcher. Want to note that. On the season, he's 4-4 with a 4.41 ERA. Imanaga, coming back from injury, has been pretty darn good, kid. 5-2 with a 2.78 ERA. Game 2, the game that I will be at, and I'm excited to be at, it will see Cade Horton coming off probably his best start in his professional career against Cleveland last Thursday, going up against David Festa, another right-handed pitcher. Festa on the season 2-3 with a 5.48 ERA, and Cade Horton, after his last start, has a 3-2 record with a 4.15 ERA. And the finale will see Colin Ray opposite Chris Paddock, another right-handed pitcher. Chris Paddock on the season 3-7 with a 4.64 ERA versus Colin Ray, who is 6-3 with a 4.13 ERA. Ty, I feel pretty good about this series. Am I nuts?
Pretty good, John. I feel great about it. I think really, you mentioned, I believe you mentioned Buxton already, right? Yeah. He's had an outstanding year. Obviously, former number one overall, number one prospect, has always been a stud. Unfortunately, dealt with injuries for so long. He's the guy in their lineup, in my opinion, that I'm fearing the most. I thought it'd be Carlos Correa at this point. I know he's probably had an okay year at this point, but 379 slug is not anything that I'm worried about too much. He's more of a guy who really does perform well in the playoffs, and he does more in the regular season. So look, I want 2 out of 3. Horton's got to be good. Like, Horton's got to be dialed in. I really, really want to make sure that we get a good start out of Cade with the situation that's at hand that we discussed earlier in this episode, which is whatever we can get out of Cade at this point, it's got to be his best, because I can almost guarantee that he's going to be on an innings limit. So whatever you got left in the tank, kid, you've done a great job for us this year thus far. Last outing out, Kyle mentioned, didn't necessarily have his best stuff last time out, but he got through it. And there is a point there of just getting through it, right? Not having your best stuff that day and still finding a way to be successful. So I think Imanaga is going to dominate tomorrow. I need a great start out of Cade, and hopefully just take 2 out of 3 in Minnesota, and then we got a big series against New York, the Bronx Bombers, or Bonkers, who can't seem to feel the ground ball these days. So should be exciting. I'm excited for you, my friend. Target Field, right? Target Field.
I have never been. I'm sure there are many people in Setup Man Nation that are trying to cross off all 30 stadiums on their list. Yep. I've been to, Miller Park. It will always be to me, but AmFam, American Family Field in Milwaukee, and Wrigley. I got to start checking some of these off. So
Yeah.
first one on the docket, Minnesota, as us Wisconsin people say.
Just make sure you see one lake, because I heard there's a couple of them that you can go see while you're there.
I will try to see a lake. But again, if you are at the game Wednesday, come say hi. Hopefully we can all sing Go Cubs Go walking out of Target Field. But that is going to do it as we are now up against the hour. So for Ty, I am Alex. Thank you for joining us tonight. I will be, because I'm still on vacation for the rest of this week, it'll be Kyle and Ty taking care of you on Thursday after the Twin Series, getting you ready for the Yankee series to end the break. We're already all-star break, man. This season is flying by. So thank you for joining us. And yeah, this will be my second to last show of the first half. So I won't say thank you quite yet. But thank you, Setup Man Nation, for joining us as always. I'm not quitting or anything. You gave me a look like I'm quitting. I'm not quitting, but just grateful that we're just half in.
Yeah. A thank you is nice.
Yeah.
Thank you's okay to say.
I think so. Well, all right, fine. Setup Man Nation, thank you.
Just click the end recording button. Let's just get this over with. This has been so good.
But before we do that, on your way out the door, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that little bell for all the content stuff. And Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, hit that subscribe button and then leave us a 5-star review and help us out there. So for Ty, I'm Alex. We will see you on Thursday. Kyle and Ty recapping the Twin Series. I'll be back on Sunday. But until then, fly the W. We beat the Cardinals. Let's go.